The following is a conversation with Fred Ewig, a former sports executive turned business coach who helps entrepreneurs stop putting out fires and start building lasting success. Fred's journey has taken him from professional hockey and college athletics to launching a business coaching practice that empowers leaders to work on their business, not in it. This is Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast, and I'm your host, Sid Bensalah. Today, we'll explore what leaders look like beyond the scoreboard, how the lessons from locker rooms apply to boardrooms, and balance she. We'll talk about burnout strategy, mindset, and the power of grit in building something meaningful. Let's dive in. Fred, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Fred, what inspired you to move from managing sports organizations to coaching business leaders?
Yeah, it's a great question. I had built a great career in building teams, more professional teams, but within the sports industry, and really wanted to take the knowledge that I had and translate that into really helping other organizations. I found that throughout my career, I was constantly just dealing with whatever was directly in front of my face, right? Putting out fires and, literally only handling the small tasks that seemed to be urgent at the time, and sometimes lost the bigger picture. So when I got into and started my practice, one of my main focuses was allowing business leaders to take a step back and kind of being that outside source to help them really take a step back out of the day-to-day and focus on, the bigger strategy and what is actually important long-term.
Mm-hmm. And was there a specific moment that made you realize, I'm ready to do this on my own?
It's a great question. I think that, I don't know if there was one particular moment, but it was more of culmination of things. And then as I was, just previously to opening my own practice, I ran a youth sports facility and had started it from the ground up, and was able to be mentored by some great folks and learned a lot about literally everything from the operational side, obviously business development, building strategy, creating business plans, and the like. So really, that when I was looking at what the next part of my journey was going to be, it really kind of was a natural fit. I was looking at some different opportunities and really, did some soul searching and loved everything about the managing part and kind of the building of a business. And so being able to translate that into my own company was a no-brainer.
Yeah. And looking back, Fred, what was harder than you expected in that transition?
Yeah, building a business, any business from scratch, it's a grind. It's definitely, some people have dreams of starting their business and instant success, but it takes a lot. You have to establish credibility. You have to make sure that you're establishing your network, and really kind of also honing your craft along the same time, right? So I think I would say the hardest part was really just kind of getting it off the ground. And luckily anything that I took from sports has really kind of translated to the building of a business, some of the perseverance and resilience and what have you.
Have you faced this kind of moment where, this kind of hesitation, saying that I need to make sure that everything is perfect, everything is ready to go before pressing the green button, or you just said, okay, let's do it now, and down the line, I will try to improve. And so how was it?
Yeah, little bit of a combination of both. I definitely wanted to make sure I had some things in place and a real good foundation. And one of the things I coach my clients on as well is you can't wait for everything to be 100% perfect before you take that first step. Otherwise, you're never going to take that step. One of the things I work with, I do a lot of work with DISC profiles, and that's really about behavior and communication styles. And there are some that really just want to make sure that all the details are completely in place before they take that first step, right? But it's kind of the perfectionist mindset, where sometimes just a little bit of progress, you don't have to be perfect the first time, right? A little bit of progress makes a big difference. If you get 1% better. So I've kind of taken that into my own personal journey as well, in my own personal business. So there were some things that I wanted to make sure I had lined up, but a lot of the things I learned just by doing, right? As I did more in my coaching practice, I've constantly gotten better, refined, and seen what's worked and what's not. And if I didn't, then I think I'd be kind of stagnant and probably not growing as much as I should be.
Yeah, sure. You started in sports sales, making 100 cold calls a day. What did that season of life teach you?
That gave me a thick skin pretty quickly. You call a number of businesses and people that aren't expecting to hear your call, and you'll hear all sorts of responses. And the first thing I learned is not to take it personally. It is a business, and and that was, and really that also got me much more uh, comfortable communicating with people and being on the phone and asking questions. It was actually, it set the stage for a lot of the rest of my career. It was definitely not the easiest job I've ever had, but all the things that I learned there, as far as, again, if you run into a roadblock, how to get through that, how to, if somebody yells at you, how to pick up the phone again, right? How to make that next call. And then how to really actually be inquisitive and ask the right questions and make sure that you're doing a lot more listening than talking. Just kind of the intro to sales was honestly a game changer for me.
Yeah. It's very interesting, Fred, when you say don't take it personally. How do you coach others through the discomfort of rejection and selling?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the biggest roadblocks in selling. It is inevitable. There is no person that sells that makes, every call is a sale, right? So, the goal is that what we do is that we help increase that percentage of, calls to meetings to sales. And there's definitely processes of that, but it takes a little bit of a little bit of a leap of faith, and honestly just the knowledge that every step, every no gets you a little closer to a yes, right? Every time you hear no, maybe that means you can refine your initial pitch, or maybe they weren't the right client, so maybe you can start targeting your efforts elsewhere. But every call has a bit of a value. And the other thing I work with them on is really to do that first, right? Because sometimes that's the thing that people hate doing or really want to put off. And one of the things that I focus on is, hey, let's get that out of the way. Let's get that done and moving on. At least dedicate whatever it might be, an hour or 2 hours of time toward that business development, and do that early. Do that first thing, right? And then you have the rest of your day to do all the other things that you're usually using to procrastinate the sales
Mm.
part. So
Fred, how do you define the best salesperson?
best salesperson
Beside of the
is,
experience, beside of what they learn,
yeah,
what's the plus?
the best salesperson is someone who is truly out to make the customer better. The salesperson who is looking to push a product, because that's what they have to do, is usually not going to be the one that is the most successful long term. Or you'll see that they jump from position to position. But the ones that start with the customer in mind and really diving deep into how their solution can help the customer's problem, help solve the customer's problem, those tend to be the best ones, because they will be the ones who do a lot of great fact finding. They do a lot of, they'll ask the right questions. They're truly inquisitive and actually care about what their clients may be saying or their prospects may be saying. Um, those those skills are invaluable. And again, I will go back to a thick skin. You still got to, as you can have the greatest intentions, but if every no, sends you down and kind of puts you into a place where you don't make that call, the next call, it's not going to get you anywhere, right? So you have to be able to kind of move on and move forward, with, even if the call doesn't go as well as you might have hoped.
Yeah, yeah. The reason I'm telling you this, I always admired the car salesperson. You know, believe it or not, there is so much to learn. Beside of the experience, the soft skills, they always have a way to look. Maybe this is not within our topic, but talking about sales, you enter a car dealership and there is hundreds of cars. You go in there and you have a budget in mind and things like that. But then I think 70, 80% you end up changing your mind because of what's the salesperson try to. Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah. It is you know, it's funny. There are some great sales techniques that car salesmen use. I think the one kind of downside is people sometimes equate any sale to the car sale process, right? Which is tends to be a little pushier, tends to be very you know, a little maybe more aggressive than some other sales process. So people actually avoid a career in sales because they don't necessarily want to be that prototypical, you know, pushy salesperson. Where, as I mentioned, a good salesperson can definitely get their product sold through, but they have to always start with the customer there, right? And then, you know, but don't get me wrong. There's some tactics and things that they do that are great from a closing standpoint. You know, like the trial close is a great one that car salesmen use or salespeople use to really kind of make sure that they've flushed out all objections before they, you know, before they get to the close. So there's some really great things. I just sometimes the idea of the car salesman is one that scares people away from a career in sales sometimes. So
Yeah, I think they have this ability to connect emotionally with a potential client,
sure,
customer.
that's important.
Yeah,
Yeah, if people
which is
people
hard,
tend
which is
to.
hard to master, to be honest with you.
It really is. And honestly, one of the great things, so I heard it years ago, and I've heard it many times since, is people tend to buy based on emotion
Hmm.
and then they justify it based on logic,
Hmm.
right? So there's always got to be some sort of emotional connection, either the way it's going to make them feel or the way it's going to make them feel when they implement it. And then they'll justify it logically. So that is always a very important piece.
Yeah, yeah. Good. What's the biggest difference between leading in sports and leading in business?
The biggest difference in leading in sports and leading in business, um, you know, I think there's a lot of similarities. I'd say leading in sports. I mean, obviously, the business side of it is very different. So, I mean, when I think of leading in sports, a lot of times I think on the
Hmm.
field, you know, or on the pitch. Whereas leading in business, again, a lot of those traits hold true, but some of the results may be different, right? I mean, there's some you know actual financial repercussions and ramifications through leading in business. But honestly, at the same time, it's really leading is leading, and what you want to do is get your team toward a common goal, right? And you want to. I'm a big fan of. There's a big difference between you know kind of leading and being the boss, right? And that's one of the biggest things that people have to get their head around. You know,
Yeah.
telling people what to do is not necessarily leading. And actually, one of the things I love in sports, and actually, I love for any leaders that I work with to kind of have that mentality is you get the team buy-in, right? The team has to be working toward a common goal, and every team member has to know what their role is in that role, in that goal, like on their way to that goal. So honestly, I think more than anything, I think there's probably more similarities and differences
Hmm.
in that world.
Yeah, yeah. You helped build the multi-dollar youth sports facility. What was that like?
That was amazing.
Mhm.
When I started with the project, we literally just broken ground, so got to see it start from literally a pile of dirt to what it became, which is you know 40-acre indoor outdoor facility. We had the unfortunate um, timing of opening up 10 days before the world shut down to
Mhm.
COVID. So we opened up the outdoor fields early March of 2020 and obviously had to shut down 10 days later. What was, you know, kind of great was seeing the bounce back actually that summer. So we were able to open back up that July of 2020. And then entirely, we had the indoor facility we opened that fall. And watching people come back, I mean, there was such a need from this from society just to get out and to get back to normalcy and sports was the vehicle I think because I saw that bounce back quicker than a lot of others. We hosted tournaments literally from July all the way through the end of the year that typically they end you know in August and but they just kept going because people had such that built up and pent up need to get out. So that was amazing. And then honestly to watch you know we grew the team from when I started it was there were two of us
Mhm.
and then by the time I left, we had about 70
Wow,
employees, which was great.
nice.
And yeah, so it was really rewarding. One of my favorite things, and I always said this, was when people would walk into the venue for the first time because they would come for maybe a lacrosse tournament or a soccer tournament. But then they'd see all that the facility had, because we also had some rock climbing walls and a ninja course and an arcade, and they just put a bar in. So like it was all about serving the customer, even outside of just the event that they were coming to
Mhm.
see. And it was always amazing to see their eyes widen when they walked in. That was probably my favorite part of my job.
Yeah, yeah. In your opinion, how has the business of youth sports changed in the last decade?
It's changed dramatically. One of the things that has really come into it, and actually is one of the when I started my practice, my coaching practice, one of the things that I was looking into was, you know, the professionalization of youth sports. It had slowly but surely been, become more of a professional mindset than obviously in the past, where it was, most locally run by the towns. A lot of it was more recreation
Mhm.
sports than anything. And then the transition came to where a lot of coaches would start their own clubs because they were great coaches. So they were like, hey, I could start a club. This would be a great way to make some money on the side. Honestly, a lot of them did it as a side hustle.
Mhm.
Um, but didn't have a lot of the business strategy behind it, right? They could coach the sport and they had some great connections, but they're missing some of the strategy. So that kind of exploded, at least in America, over the past, I'd say, 5 to 10 years. But I'd say within the past year and a half to 2 years, what's been really game changing or really changing is that now I think the private equity world
Mhm.
has really seen the potential. I mean, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, youth sports. It's been shown parents will spend on their kids' sports programs before they spend on some of the essentials, right?
Yeah.
It's just become that big of a part of our society. And of course, whenever that happens, then there's private equity that sees that potential. So now they've kind of come in and started consolidating some of the youth sports organizations. And now, in an effort to make them more efficient, and then obviously, ideally, kind of flip them, but it's now changed the entire model to much more of a professional and business type of atmosphere.
Mhm.
Whereas obviously before it was just about getting kids out and having them, you know, start their athletic journey. So it's definitely been, like I said, the landscape has shifted definitely within 10 years, but within the past year and or year or two, it's really taken a turn.
Yeah. Working on a business, not in it, it's a major concept in your coaching. What does it mean in practice?
Yeah, and so as I mentioned previously, I had in a lot of my career had spent time literally working in the business, right?
Mhm.
Whatever was directly important, whatever was directly in front of me seemed to be the most important thing at the time. Whereas what I needed to do was take time out of my day and time out of my week to really focus on some of the bigger picture items. So that's what I do now with my clients is I make sure that there is time scheduled in their calendar, however they do it. And I'm not, I always tell people, I don't care what system you use as
Mhm.
long as you use a system and then it works. So I make sure that when they're blocking their day or blocking their week, that there is at least some time, and it could literally be as little as an hour or two a week that is spent with their email off, with their phone on do not disturb, and really working on some of those bigger picture items that are going to be longer term, but maybe not as urgent, but really going to lead to the success of the company,
Mm.
right? And that's, and one of the things actually, I have a couple of clients that I meet with every other week, so we meet twice a month, and during those off weeks where we don't meet, I still have a block in their calendar for that time that we would meet, and that's when they're going to work on the coaching, the things that we work on during our sessions,
Mm.
just to really get them out of the day to day. And it's tough. It's really, it's really hard when you get an email notification or you get a text or a call and you think it's the most urgent thing in the world. And sometimes, listen, sometimes it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's something that has to be dealt with in the moment. But more times than not, it can wait. And that's probably part of the hardest things. Because if you're constantly reacting to an email or a text or a phone call, you lose that depth of work
Mhm.
that you're doing. And there's studies that show it takes 15 to 20 minutes
Mm.
to get back to that level of depth. So if you're getting interrupted every 5 minutes, you're never going to get there So my biggest thing with my clients is really blocking time and literally shutting themselves off from anything that is not, 911, to really focus on some of those important things that just may not be urgent at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone talks about hustle, but you emphasize grit. What's the difference?
It's great. They go kind of hand in hand
Hmm.
in my eyes. Hustle is definitely, just the ability to get out and do it. And actually, I was relate my athletic career. I was always the hustle guy. I was never the most physically, skilled athlete on the floor, on the field, but I was always that person that was going to be everywhere. And grit. I think the difference is, for me, is that grit is that, going back to resilience,
Yeah.
right? The ability to push through. So you can hustle, but you're going to run into
Mm.
roadblocks. And if you don't have the grit to really kind of get through that and get through some of those tougher times, then all that hustle is not going to really get you very far.
Yeah. Have you coached someone through a low point?
And there's not a business owner at all that hasn't had a low point. Sometimes I joke, sometimes I am a part-time business coach, part-time
Yeah.
therapist. And so yeah, definitely definitely have had some, and honestly, it's a lot of it goes to mindset, and I always tell people it starts with
Mm.
mindset. Because there are going to be ups and downs, especially, owning a small business, especially the way that environments change. And it could be a cash flow issue, it could be a staffing issue, it could be whatever it might be, but um, there's going to be ups and downs. And the key is to not let the downs kind of take you, kind of mentally take you
Mm.
down, because that just leads to less action. It leads to, and ultimately less success. So I have some different tactics, and it depends on the client, depending on what motivates them, and really what would get them through. And had one client who his bank account went down to, literally the hundreds of dollars, and he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make payroll. So what he did is, actually, I had him take a screenshot of that on his account, on his, of his bank account, and put it up on his computer. And the next time he didn't want to, make a call, make a sales
Mm.
call, or get into, I wanted him to look at that and say, hey, that's never where you want to be again, right? So that was his motivator. Sometimes it's the carrot, though. Sometimes people have views of the big house, or whatever that financial independence or success looks like
Mm.
for them. And I have that in front of them, front and center. But yeah, it's just it's definitely it's a necessary part of being a business owner and an entrepreneur.
Mm.
I would love to say it's all, sunshine and rainbows, but
Yeah.
there's definitely some ups and downs.
That's a really good example of coaching right there. And why do so many business owners wait to get help before things go completely wrong?
That is the $1 million question. People, I think, are afraid, or hesitant to admit that they need help.
Mm.
Um, I honestly, in my opinion, I think
Especially dudes.
everybody,
Especially men.
especially dudes, especially yeah,
Yeah.
especially men.
Yeah.
They will grit it out. No, I got this.
Yeah.
And it's funny. People feel, especially, I have clients in the
Mm.
trades, and they are definitely, very type A, very, you know, um, very stubborn.
Mm.
And it took a while before they finally realized that they could use some help, but because their solution was always, hey, I'm going to roll up my sleeves, I'm going to work hard, and then if times get tough, I'm going to roll them up even more and work harder. And truth is, honestly, sometimes they don't have the right systems in place,
Mm.
or their staff in place, or the support system to get them where they need to go. Right. So the hardest part is getting them to understand that, it's best to start, engaging with a coach or some sort of outside person, or what have you, before it ever gets to that point. And it requires some vulnerability. It
Yeah.
requires
Yeah, it does.
literally the ability to say, hey, I can use some help here.
Yeah. And I think the toughest part is to help clients stay accountable without burning them out. It's quite challenging. Yeah.
It is, and honestly, it's the most important part, though, because I always tell people I could put the best plan together for you, but if you don't do it,
Mm.
then what's the point, right? So, and again, certain clients are, like certain types of accountability. Some want you to be really hard on
Mm.
them. Some it's a little softer. It just depends on kind of what would really get them to move forward.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go back and talk about leadership. Athletes often struggle when transitioning into leadership roles. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think the athletes, the best athletes have a natural talent. Um, and so sometimes they think that everybody has the same talents that they might.
Hmm.
And so when they get into more of a leadership role in a business setting, or actually honestly even in an athletic setting, what ends up happening is they try to teach the way that they would want to be taught,
Hmm.
and or they would want to be led. And honestly, and I learned this the hard way too, where if you lead the way that you want to be led, you're going to isolate actually a lot of people that have a different style, right? That it might not appeal to. And like I said, also I always joke that the best hitters don't make the best hitting
Yeah,
coaches, right? So because they just think, oh yeah, this is what I did and this is how it works,
yeah,
right?
right.
And that's not the way that everybody's going to experience it. And I think the same translates into the business world too. So if you're like, yeah, this is what I've done, and I've been able to have this amount of success, just purely based on my natural ability, then when you run into people and like I said in leadership capacity, they might not have that ability, or honestly, you may have just been doing it wrong the whole time. So, that's where some of the challenges can come in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hard for so many athletes because they've been their whole career or part of their career is to perform, to train, put in the hours, hard work, and perform. But it's hard to help them sometimes, depend on the persona, to help them shift from a performer to strategist. And I don't know if, with your experience, Fred, if there are specific tools or systems you've seen work well in this kind of transition.
It's a great point. And that translates, by the way, not just athletes.
Mm.
That translates in business as well. It constantly you'll see that the best performers get promoted to management,
Hmm.
and that could be a huge mistake, right? The best salespeople are not normally the best sales managers, right? Because what makes a great salesperson is definitely not what's going to make a great sales manager. So that type of mindset is kind of where people run into challenges, right? Where like, oh, this guy's doing great. I'm going to promote him or her to the next level, which is a manager role. Whereas honestly, sometimes they're best being doers. So so part of the answer to your question is sometimes it's better not to put them into that position. I'd rather have someone really play to their strengths and where they're going to put the best, have the best input
Hmm.
into the organization. And sometimes that's in a doing capacity. I've had a client of mine right now I'm working with where he is transitioning one of his employees into more of a general manager type role. And honestly, I asked him a question, and they've been working together for years. I said,
Yeah.
is she the type of person that I mean, she's the person that if you ask her to do a task, she will do it and she will do it amazingly.
Hmm.
But is she that type of person that is, more of a strategist and saying, hey, here's a problem. How are we going to solve this problem? And honestly, just kind of let her come up with the idea. So I think some of it really is, I mean, listen, leadership training is always great because it really helps people realize what the traits of a great leader are, what some of those things are, and some of the things they might run into when they become a leader, because it does get a little lonelier
Hmm.
as you get up to the top.
Hmm.
But again, at the day, you just want to make sure, especially as an organization, that you're hiring or promoting someone into that position, in more of a leadership position, that actually has that skill set, and that's where their best can be used.
Earlier during our intro chat, you mentioned the trend on the rise, which is private equity in youth sports. Why is private equity suddenly interested in youth sports?
Yeah, it goes back to the potential, right?
Hmm.
There is so much fragmentation, first of all, in the space between organization. Each sport as well has different fragmentation between clubs and facilities and event right holders and all these different factions that are all kind of separate. And what we've seen in the private equity world is that they are kind of buying up a number of these and consolidating, right? So now there are groups out there that now run facilities and clubs and run events, and there's some efficiencies there, right? So what they're able to do by uniting all these groups
Hmm.
is like I said, create some efficiencies in staffing and in protocol and what have you, which obviously then helps the margin. And that's ultimately as a private equity person, that's or a firm, that's what you're looking for, right? Is you're obviously looking for something with a higher margin that you can then really right size and then ideally honestly sell off if necessary, or if it when you get to that level. So that I think has been where they've seen it, is they've seen that it's a opportunity with amazing revenue numbers. I mean, like I said, it's a $2 billion or
Wow.
multi-billion-dollar industry, and only growing,
Hmm.
right? And so how do they then, capture that revenue and then make it more efficient, right? Because if you're, again, all these small clubs and facilities, some of those margins might not be great on their own, but if you consolidate, there's some definite opportunities there.
Mm. Mm. And how is this inflow of money changing the way organization operates in our days?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how you look at it, the good news is that there is more professionalism in it, in that, there's some definite ways and standard operating procedures that are being done that may not have been done, when it was someone doing it as more of a side project or what have you. You could argue that you lose a little bit of it is less about the love of the game sometimes now, and it's more about just kind of like, parents want to see their children excel, right? And they want to see them at the top of the game. And either whether it's for college scholarships or whether, just from a competitive standpoint, they want their kid to be, up there, and they would kind of keep up with the Joneses. And honestly, to do that, it costs a lot of money.
Mm.
I'm a parent of three children who are going through that right now,
Mm.
right? So I've seen it both on the business side, as well as on the
Mm.
parent side, and it's becoming more and more expensive, and honestly, in some cases, cost
Yeah.
prohibitive to have people do this. And that's kind of one of the downsides of it.
Yeah. And this trend, does it really help and impact youth sports? Because youth sport is all about having fun, trying to use the power of sports to connect, to make friends, to discover inner qualities that the youngsters they don't know about, which make them much more confident, which will help them going forward, building resilience, teaching them responsibility, building their personality. But the minute, in my opinion, Fred, the minute we see this amount of money invested in this sector, and like you just said, now the revenues are quite staggering. Thanks God we don't have it here yet. I mean, this trend, it didn't hit Europe yet because the youth sport is still looked after by various entities, mainly government, municipalities, local governments. And then, if you're lucky enough, you're talented and you want to pursue a sporting career, then it falls under clubs, and then from there it goes to the national governing body of various sports. But the minute you have private equity involved, I'm not sure it has the same impact as, let's say, professional sports or promoters or right holders. Or what do you think?
Yeah, it's a fine line, and unfortunately, I think, and going back to something I said earlier, where if you start with the customer and in mind, and if your goal is to provide the best experience
Mm.
for the customers that you have, because the parents and the children's expectations are super high, right? And especially the more they pay, the more that
Mm-hmm.
expectation is. Um, so if you start with that and you're really about providing them the best opportunities, I think there are some positives there, because the money does provide extra
It
resources
does.
and what
It
have
does.
you.
Yeah.
But to your point, honestly, I got my kids into sports because of the life skills
Mm-hmm.
that sports
Yeah.
teach you, whether it's teamwork, whether it's resiliency, whether it's hard work and dedication, those types of things. Whether it's honestly how to pick yourself up after you got knocked
Yeah.
down, like those are the types of things that sports really do teach you. And honestly, I agree with you that it's great when it starts at a young
Mm.
age. I think one of the challenges, and it's happened even before private equity, is that with the travel sport world and in our country in America, the rec departments tend to die out pretty quickly, and those are very introductory and very kind of, they were set up to provide everybody an opportunity to do it. It's very usually a very low cost way to get involved in a sport and to learn a sport,
Mhm.
and also honestly to stay
Yeah.
active. And now quickly people get tired of that and they think, oh, if my kid's going to do anything, they need to be in this league, and I have to pay, $5,000 a year to this club, and to really get to that level. And that the challenge is that, unfortunately, because it's kind of like, again, keeping up with the Joneses. Well, if other kids are doing it, if other kids are playing the sport year round, then in order for my kid to compete, he or she has to play year round,
Mhm.
right? And then it leads to more injuries. It leads to kids burning out. They just get done with the sport way sooner than probably they could have if they had been able to kind of maybe stay a little more at the
Mhm.
recreational level sooner. So that's the unfortunate
Mhm.
part of that is if like I said, and I think it happens more with private equity money
Mhm.
versus because they are literally bottom line driven. But if the organization can hold to the mission, I think at least it can help a little bit. But yeah, I
Mhm.
mean the cost has gotten. I mean, unfortunately, it drives a lot of people out.
And for the families, for the parents, what's the end game? Is it maybe, let's say, investing on their kids? Probably it gives them more chances in terms of scholarship or.
I think that's definitely a big one.
Mhm.
Because I mean, right now in the States, the cost of college tuition
Yeah,
is
it's crazy. It's
astronomical, and
crazy. It's
it is
crazy.
and it's not slowing down
We're
anytime
lucky here,
soon.
man. Here it's free.
Oh man, I envy you. I got three that are about to go through that journey in a few
Yeah,
years. So,
yeah.
but honestly, so I think that is definitely a part of it. It's interesting, but and it's tough because it's only a very small amount of
Mm.
people that actually are going to get scholarships, and honestly, even a smaller amount that are going to get full scholarships based on their athletic
Mm.
ability. Now there are, the NCAA or the college landscape's
Yeah.
changed recently with the NIL and the national image likeness money that's flown in,
Mm.
so people see that possibility as again as a way to make some income and to make their money back. But
Mhm.
honestly, I'm pretty sure if you just invested the money that you spent on the youth sports world, just to get that
Mm.
scholarship, between travel and club and everything that the hotels you have to go to for these tournaments, if you put all that into, a 529 plan or invested that smartly, you probably would end up, pretty close to being all right. And so that's, I think that's part of it. But again, I think the other part of it now has become even the people that don't have those,
Mm.
aspirations, or at least that thought that, their kid is going to be a Division I athlete. I think just there's a competitive nature. You don't want to be seen as the kid who's falling
Yeah.
behind,
Yeah.
right? So now there is
Yeah.
literally just to keep up with
Yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Good. Now it's time for our lightning round.
All right,
Ready for speedy Q&A?
let's go.
Let's do this. Morning person or a night owl?
I am definitely a morning person. Which has been a complete shift for me. But yes, morning person.
Great. What's your favorite sports team of all time?
Favorite sports team of all time. So I would have to say the 1986 New York Mets were my favorite sports
Aha.
team of all time.
Nice. Yeah. What's a non-negotiable part of your daily routine?
A non-negotiable part of my daily routine is a morning cup of coffee. Without that, my day doesn't start. So
Yeah, yeah. A book that changed your thinking.
I would say Who Not How
Hmm.
is a great book that I now work on all my clients, because it's, usually I used to think about how I was going to get something done, and now it's more like, all right, who can I get to get that done? And so I can focus on more important things.
Yeah. Favorite way to relax or unwind after a long day?
Honestly, the beauty is to just turn on the television, watch whatever sporting event, and honestly, right now it's baseball season, so I nothing beats just relaxing in front of a game of baseball at the end of the day.
Have you followed the basketball finals last weekend?
I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I was cheering UCLA. So they were part of the Final Four. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Fred, if you could have a dinner with a historical person, who will it be and why?
So the person I'd have dinner with, it's kind of out of left field, pardon the pun, but his name is Bill Veck. He is basically the godfather of sports marketing. So
Okay.
any event that you go to, any sporting event you go to, and you see all the promotions that go on
Hmm.
halftime, during the
Yeah, yeah.
intermissions or what have you, or the music that plays, like that was all him. He owned a team. He owned a number of teams in baseball back in, I think it was like the 40s and 50s, and literally revolutionized the game.
What's his name
So
again? Bill Veck.
Bill Veck, yeah. So his last name is spelled Veeck.
CK. I will check him out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What's one tool you can't live without?
My Google Calendar. Without that, I'm lost.
Is it color coded or?
It is color coded. It definitely is.
Fantastic. A hidden talent or a hobby?
A hidden talent or a hobby. I'd like to. So honestly, I'm big into fitness.
Hmm.
So one of my big hobbies. So I've actually really picked up running in my later years. So I'd like to run a lot more than I ever did.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm actually not bad at it now.
Okay, nice. Favorite place you've ever traveled?
I'd have to say Ireland. My wife and I went a number of years
Hmm.
back, and it was honestly, apparently, we went the one week where there was no rain, and it was honestly one of the most
You were
beautiful
lucky.
landscapes that we'd seen. Yeah, that's what they kept telling us. It was
Yeah,
amazing.
Ireland, Scotland, yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
yep.
even here in Sweden. So, yeah, when it's a sunny day, it's one of the best places. I can tell you that. Yeah. Best advice you've ever received?
I would say follow your passion.
Hmm.
That was it was my mom. She was kind of stuck in a job that she didn't love for about 30
Yeah.
years, and honestly has led me to be in the sports world for 20 because I loved every second of it. So
Hmm. If you have 60 minutes with no distractions, how would you use it?
60 minutes with no
Hmm.
distractions. Well, I it depends on what I need to do. So I love to read, and I'm constantly learning. So if I can get 60 minutes away and just get into a book, and honestly, either a business related book or honestly sometimes it's a good personal read. I would love to do that. Otherwise, as I mentioned to you earlier, I do have time in my calendar where I have 60 minutes with no distractions where I work on some of the bigger ideas and bigger things in my coaching practice as well. So
Yeah, yeah, nice. One word that describes how you want to show up every day.
energetic. I am ready to take on the day pretty much every day. So
Great. And lastly, Fred, one piece of advice or wisdom to our listeners on any topic.
I think one of the best shirts I've ever seen is that hard work trumps talent when talent doesn't work hard. And it's something I've always lived my life by. Like you could be the most talented person in the world and have the most innate abilities, but you need to put in the time. You need to get the reps, and you really need to keep working hard. And no matter what life throws at you, you just keep pushing through. So that would be, it's a word of advice I give to everybody, especially my kids. So,
Fred Ewig, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
yeah, thanks for having me. This was great.
Fantastic. I want to end today's conversation with this quote from legendary coach John Wooden. Success is a peace of mind which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you are capable. Thank you for tuning in to the Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast. If you enjoyed the audio of our show, we have more for you. You can now watch the entire episode on our YouTube and Spotify channel. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to our show. Until next time, stay curious, inspired, and make a difference. We'll see you soon. Take care.